I still remember standing outside my parents' house on Christmas Eve, snow falling gently on my shoulders. 2 years of silence, 2 years of healing, and one phone call from my mother changed everything. She said my father had a heart condition, that this might be his last Christmas. So I drove 14 hours to say goodbye. But when that front door opened, I saw someone who should not have been there. That was the moment I realized my family used my fear of losing my father to trap me. Before I begin this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, to understand why I was standing there that Christmas night, I need to take you back to the beginning, to the day I thought I had found the woman of my dreams. My name is Carson, and 3 years ago, I was a software engineer working at a tech company in Seattle. Life was good. I had a stable job, a nice apartment downtown, and I had just started believing that maybe I was ready to settle down. I was 30 years old, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had everything figured out. Then I met Jessica. It happened at an outdoor concert in the summer, one of those free events the city puts on at the waterfront. I was standing in line for coffee when this woman in front of me turned around too quickly, and her iced latte went all over my shirt. She gasped, her face turning red, and started apologizing while trying to wipe my chest with napkins. I just laughed. Something about her panic, her genuine embarrassment, made me laugh instead of getting annoyed. We ended up talking for the rest of the concert. She worked in marketing for a startup downtown. She had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. By the end of the night, I had her number, and by the end of the month, we were officially dating. 2 years went by like a dream. Jessica and I moved in together after the first year. We talked about the future, about kids, about growing old together. She was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, funny, beautiful, and she seemed to love me for exactly who I was. So I proposed. I took her back to the restaurant where we had our first official date. Got down on one knee right there between the tables. She cried. She said yes. I thought that was the beginning of our forever. I should tell you about my family, specifically about my sister Megan. Megan is 3 years older than me. Growing up, she was always the favorite. Not in an obvious way, but in 1,000 small ways that added up over the years. When we were kids and fought over toys, my parents would tell me to let my sister have it. When Megan got into trouble at school, there was always an excuse. When I achieved something, there was always a but attached. I remember one time in high school, I had been working on a science project for months. It was about renewable energy, and I had built this entire model of a solar-powered house. The night before the science fair, Megan had some friends over. I woke up the next morning to find my project destroyed. She said it was an accident, that someone bumped into the table. My parents just shrugged and said, accidents happen. I lost first place that year. But despite everything, I loved my sister. I told myself that was just how families worked. Some kids get more attention than others. It did not mean she was a bad person. It just meant we were different. When I brought Jessica home to meet my family for Thanksgiving, I was nervous. Not because of Jessica, but because I wanted my family to see that I had finally done something right. I had found someone who loved me. Megan had just broken up with her boyfriend at the time, so she was in a mood. But when she met Jessica, something shifted. She became overly friendly, almost too interested. She kept complimenting Jessica, asking her questions, wanting to know everything about her. I thought Megan was just happy for me. I thought she was finally being a supportive sister. My mother, Diane, pulled me aside that night. She said Jessica was lovely, but then added that she hoped I could keep her, that I was never very good at relationships. I brushed it off. That was just how my mother talked. She did not mean anything by it. Before Jessica and I left that weekend, Megan asked for Jessica's phone number. She said she wanted to stay in touch, to be friends. I thought it was a little strange, but Jessica seemed happy about it, so I did not say anything. 3 months before the wedding, things started to feel different. I was deep into a major project at work, putting in 60-hour weeks to meet a deadline. Jessica was understanding at first, but then she started spending more time with Megan. She said they were going to lunch together, that Megan was helping her understand our family better. I thought it was sweet. My fiancé and my sister becoming close. What could be better than that? One evening I came home early from work. The project had hit a snag, and I decided to take the rest of the day off. When I walked into the apartment, Jessica and Megan were sitting in the living room. They were laughing about something, but the moment they saw me, they went quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like walking into a room where people were just talking about you. Jessica recovered first. She smiled and said they were planning a surprise for the wedding. Megan would not look at me. She grabbed her purse, said she had to go, and left without making eye contact. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, Jessica hugged me tighter than usual. She whispered that she loved me. But there was something in her voice, a slight tremor, that I could not explain. I told myself I was being paranoid. Stress from work was making me see things that were not there. My sister and my fiancé were friends. That was a good thing. I repeated that to myself until I almost believed it. 2 weeks before the wedding, everything fell apart. I was supposed to be in San Francisco for a work conference, but the main speaker canceled at the last minute, and the whole thing got pushed back a week. I decided to surprise Jessica. I stopped at a flower shop on the way home, picked up a bouquet of her favorites, and drove back to our apartment with a smile on my face. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Megan Carr. I did not think much of it at first. They were friends now. Maybe they were doing more wedding planning. I walked up to our door, flowers in hand, and let myself in. The apartment was quiet, but I could hear something from the bedroom. Laughter. Soft voices. I walked down the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly open. I pushed it open the rest of the way, and there they were. My sister, my fiancé, in my bed. I cannot describe what that moment felt like. It was like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped. I could not breathe. I could not move. I just stood there holding those flowers, watching as Jessica screamed and Megan pulled the sheets up to cover herself. I do not know how long I stood there. It might have been 10 seconds. It might have been a minute. Time stopped making sense. Then I turned around and walked out. I did not say a word. I did not yell or cry or throw things. I just got in my car and drove to a hotel. I sat in that dark room all night, staring at the wall, trying to understand how my entire life had just collapsed. The next morning, I called my parents. I told them what I had seen. I expected anger on my behalf. I expected them to be as devastated as I was. My father, Richard, was silent. My mother started crying, but not for the reason I expected. She said that Megan was my sister, that there must have been a reason, that maybe I was not seeing the whole picture. I could not believe what I was hearing. My mother was already making excuses. Megan called me that afternoon. She was sobbing, saying she was sorry, that it was not her fault. She actually said that Jessica had seduced her first. Like that made it better. Like that erased the betrayal. I hung up without responding. Jessica sent me a long text message later that night. She said I had been too busy, too focused on work, that I had not been paying attention to her needs. She made it sound like what she did was somehow my fault. I canceled the wedding. Lost over $15,000 in deposits. Venue, catering, flowers, photographer, all gone. I did not care about the money. Money could be earned back. Trust could not. The worst part was having to explain it to everyone. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives who had already bought plane tickets. Every conversation was a fresh wound. Every pitying look was a reminder of what I had lost. A month later, my mother called again. She said Megan was very sorry. She said I needed to forgive and move on, that holding grudges was unhealthy. She said Megan was family, and family forgives each other. I tried to explain that this was not something you just forgive. This was not a borrowed sweater or a forgotten birthday. This was the ultimate betrayal from the person who was supposed to have my back since childhood. My father called next. He said I was being selfish, that I was tearing the family apart by not letting this go. Selfish. He called me selfish. Even my grandmother Ruth called. She was gentler about it, but the message was the same. Let it go. Move on. Do not let one mistake destroy the family. One mistake. That is what they called it. I realized then that my family had made their choice. They chose Megan, just like they had chosen her my entire life. Every time there was a conflict, every time there was a decision to be made, they chose her. And now when she had done the worst thing imaginable, they were choosing her again. So I made my own choice. I blocked all of their numbers. I deleted their emails without reading them. I went to my boss and requested a transfer to our Denver office. Within a month, I had packed up my life in Seattle and started over in a new city where nobody knew my name or my story. The first year in Denver was brutal. I barely slept. I could not bring myself to trust anyone. I went to work, came home, and sat in my empty apartment staring at the walls. Food lost its taste. Music lost its meaning. I was going through the motions of being alive without actually living. Then Derek found me. Derek was my best friend from college. We had lost touch over the years, but somehow he tracked me down through LinkedIn. He was living in Boulder just an hour away, and he insisted on meeting up. I almost said no, but something made me say yes. That first dinner with Derek probably saved my life. He did not push me to talk. He just sat there eating his burger, telling me about his job and his girlfriend and his plans to go hiking that summer. Normal conversation, no pity, no judgment, just two old friends catching up. Slowly, I started to heal. I joined a gym. I started reading books about psychology and emotional recovery. I went to therapy for a few months. I learned that what happened to me was not my fault, that I did not deserve it, and that I had every right to protect myself from people who hurt me, even if those people were family. My mother somehow got my new email address. Every few weeks, a message would appear in my inbox. I never responded, but sometimes I read them. She told me Megan and Jessica had broken up. She told me Jessica had moved away. She told me Megan was suffering, that she was depressed, that she needed her brother. Then came the part that made me laugh out loud. My mother wrote that Megan was also a victim, that Jessica had manipulated her, taken advantage of her vulnerability after her breakup. They were still making excuses. They were still rewriting history to make Megan the innocent one. By the second year in Denver, my life had transformed. I got promoted to a senior position. I bought a small house with a backyard. I had friends, real friends, who knew my story and respected my boundaries. I was not fully healed, but I was healing. Then December came and my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I answered without thinking. It was my mother. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said my father had suffered a heart attack. He had to have a stent put in. The doctors were worried about his condition. She said this might be his last Christmas. I sat there in my living room phone pressed to my ear and felt my chest tighten. Despite everything, Richard was still my father. He had never been perfect, but he had also never been cruel. Not like my mother. Not like Megan. I asked if Megan would be there. My mother hesitated, then promised she would not be. She said this was about family, about saying goodbye, about making peace, before it was too late. Against every instinct, I said yes. I drove 14 hours from Denver to Seattle. 14 hours of thinking, remembering, preparing myself for what was to come. I told myself I could handle seeing my parents. I could make peace with my father. I could be the bigger person just this once. The snow was falling when I pulled up to my parents' house on Christmas Eve. The lights were on warm and golden through the windows. I sat in my car for a few minutes gathering my courage. Then I walked up to the front door and knocked. My mother opened the door with a smile that seemed too bright. I stepped inside. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon, just like every Christmas of my childhood. I took off my coat and walked toward the living room. Megan was sitting on the couch. My father was in his armchair looking completely healthy. No pale skin, no weakness, no sign of a man who was supposedly at death's door, and they were not alone. My grandmother Ruth was there, my Aunt Linda, my Uncle James, my cousins. The entire extended family all looking at me with expressions that ranged from hopeful to nervous. My mother closed the door behind me. She put her hand on my shoulder and said this was a family intervention. She said it was time to heal, time to forgive, time to be a family again. I had been ambushed. Everything my mother had told me was a lie. My father was not dying. This was not about saying goodbye. This was about forcing me to face Megan, to forgive her in front of the whole family, to play my assigned role of the understanding brother who always lets things go. Megan stood up. Her eyes were red, and her voice shook as she spoke. She said she was sorry, that she had made a terrible mistake, that not a day went by when she did not regret what she had done. My mother chimed in immediately. She said I needed to forgive, that holding on to anger was destroying me. That family was more important than any grudge. My father leaned forward in his chair. He said 2 years was long enough, that I had made my point, that it was time to move on, like an adult. My grandmother spoke softly, saying families do not abandon each other over one mistake. She said blood was thicker than any temporary problem. Aunt Linda added that Megan had been punished enough. She said Megan had been depressed for 2 years, that she had lost weight, that she was barely functioning. She said Megan needed her brother. I stood there surrounded by my family and listened to every word. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one of them acknowledged what I had lost. The woman I was going to marry, the $15,000, the years of therapy, the sleepless nights, the trust that had been shattered into a million pieces. They did not want reconciliation. They wanted me to accept what happened and move on quietly, just like I had done my entire life. They wanted the old Carson, the one who always gave in, the one who always put everyone else first, but that Carson was gone. I stood up slowly. My voice was calm when I spoke, calmer than I expected. I said that my entire life I had given Megan everything. I let her have my toys. I let her have the attention. I let her take credit for things I accomplished. I thought that was what love meant in a family. But she took the woman I was going to marry. She slept with my fiancé in my own bed. And everyone in this room was calling that a mistake. I turned to look directly at Megan. I told her she was not apologizing because she felt genuine remorse. She was apologizing because she wanted to feel better about herself. She wanted absolution without accountability. I turned to my parents. I said they had lied to me about my father's health to manipulate me into coming here. I asked them if that was their idea of family love. The room was silent. Nobody moved. I said I had spent 2 years building a new life. I had found peace. I had found happiness. And I was not going to let anyone take that away from me again. I walked toward the door. My mother followed me, grabbing my arm. She said I could not leave on Christmas, that this was family, that I was being cruel. I stopped at the door and turned to face her one last time. I told her that last Christmas I spent alone in an empty apartment. I said I had gotten used to it. Then I walked out into the snow, got in my car, and drove away. I did not look back. I drove through the night. The snow kept falling, but I did not care. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I stopped at a small diner off the highway. I ordered coffee and sat by the window watching the flakes drift down under the streetlights. For the first time in 2 years, I felt truly free. I had spent so long hoping my family would change, hoping they would finally see me, finally choose me, finally acknowledge my pain. But that night, I let go of that hope, and with it, I let go of the disappointment that had been weighing me down. I got back to Denver on Christmas morning. I called Derek and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said something I will never forget. He said I had done the right thing. He said family does not mean you have to accept abuse. He said I deserved better. I blocked every phone number connected to my family. I blocked every email address. This time there was no hesitation. 6 months later, everything had changed. I got promoted to project manager. My team respected me. My boss trusted me with the biggest clients. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And then I met Sophie. She worked in the design department, and we were assigned to the same project. She had this quiet confidence that drew me in. We started with coffee breaks, then lunches, then dinners. She knew about my past because I told her early on. I did not want any secrets. She listened, and she did not judge. She just said that everyone carries something and that what matters is how you move forward. We started dating. Slowly, carefully, with both of us understanding that trust takes time. She was patient with me when I got anxious. She never pushed. She just stayed. I joined a hiking group with Derek. We would drive up into the mountains every other weekend, spending hours on trails surrounded by nothing but trees and sky and fresh air. I made friends there, real friends, people who knew nothing about my past and liked me for who I was. I adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Max. He was waiting for me every day when I came home from work, tail wagging, tongue out, pure joy in his eyes. My house did not feel empty anymore. About a year after that Christmas confrontation, I ran into someone from my old life, a friend from Seattle who happened to be in Denver for work. We grabbed lunch, and he gave me updates I had not asked for. Megan was still single. She had gone through therapy, but had not really changed. My mother still talked about me to anyone who would listen, playing the victim, saying I had abandoned my family over nothing. They had rewritten the story to make themselves the innocent ones, and me the villain. I listened to all of this and felt something I did not expect. Nothing. No anger, no sadness, no desire for revenge or vindication, just a quiet acceptance that some people will never change. And that was okay. Their opinions did not define me. Their narrative did not control my life. I finished my lunch, said goodbye to my old friend, and went back to my life. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to know something important. You do not owe anyone your forgiveness. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself when you are ready, not a debt you pay to people who hurt you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. Family is not just about blood. Family is about the people who choose to love you, support you, and respect you. Derek is my family. Sophie is my family. The friends I hike with, the colleagues who celebrate my successes, even Max with his wagging tail. They are my family now. I'm sitting on my back porch as I tell you this story. Max is lying at my feet. Sophie just brought me a cup of coffee. The sun is setting over the Denver skyline, painting everything gold and orange. This is my life now. This is my family, and I would not trade it for anything. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you find your own peace, your own family, your own happy ending. You deserve it.